I stared at the text from Dad. "You're not invited to Mom's birthday." My chest tightened, a mix of shock and disbelief flooding every nerve. Just yesterday, we were joking about her gift, planning the flowers, and now this? My own father drawing lines I never thought he would, as if I didn't exist. For one raw second, I considered texting him back, demanding an explanation, but I froze. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. Mom's birthday had always been sacred, a small tradition where we laughed, cried, and remembered Dad and I as a team. And now I was erased. I could hear Mom humming in the background, blissfully unaware of the tension. My sister, who always sided with Dad on these rules, was probably already getting dressed for the party. My phone buzzed again, a reminder. The clock was ticking, and the walls between us were closing faster than I realized. Why would he do this? I muttered aloud, pacing the room. It wasn't just exclusion, it was a statement. A family without me present, as if I had done some unforgivable crime. The hurt was thick, almost tangible, pressing down on my ribs. I wanted to scream, to run there and crash the celebration, but I knew it would only escalate things. Then it happened. A single message from my sister's fiancé popped up in the group chat. 2 words. "Wait, what?" I froze mid-step. My heart skipped, confusion mixing with a glimmer of hope. Was he questioning Dad's decision? Or was this the start of something worse? Either way, he had just thrown a wrench into the perfect little family plan of exclusion. I replayed the scenario in my head 100 times. Dad's stern face, the way Mom would inevitably notice my absence, and my sister, likely caught in between, uncomfortable. The thought of confrontation terrified me, yet part of me felt an adrenaline rush. The unexpected ally or enemy had just entered the game. I decided to act strategically. I could storm in and demand answers, or I could watch, observe, and let their reactions reveal their intentions. Choosing patience felt almost unnatural, like I was suppressing fire in my veins. But I had learned early. Patience often yields the sweetest vengeance. By the time I got to the living room, voices were muffled, laughter and clinking plates already in progress. Mom had no idea. I lingered by the doorway, unseen, my sister adjusting her dress while whispering something to her fiancé. And then, that look, his eyes locking on mine for a fleeting second. Curiosity, surprise, maybe guilt. It was enough to anchor me in the moment. The air was thick. I could smell the perfume Mom always wore, the warm scent of candles, and something bitter. Resentment, betrayal, maybe my own anger radiating in waves I hadn't controlled yet. Every instinct screamed, act, explode, demand justice. Yet I waited, letting the tension swell, feeding on it. 2 weeks ago, Dad had started these rules for family gatherings, insisting I stay out of certain celebrations. I never understood why, but there it was. Today, it wasn't just a rule, it was a public declaration. My absence would speak louder than words. And my sister's fiancé, with his 2 simple words, had just cracked the surface of an unseen fault line. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an old friend. "Everything okay?" I stared at it, unsure what to say. Could I even put into words the mix of emotions coursing through me? Betrayal, shock, confusion, and the tiniest spark of anticipation. Yes, anticipation. Because that 2-word message had just opened a door I didn't even realize was there. I moved closer to the room, careful to remain out of sight. From this angle, I could see everyone, the dynamic, the unsuspecting bliss. Mom laughed at a story Dad told. My sister smiled nervously, and her fiancé, his face a mixture of discomfort and hesitation, kept glancing at me as if aware I was watching. I felt power stir in me, quiet but undeniable. Observation was my first weapon. Then came the small revelation. The fiancé whispered again, a sentence I caught, almost inaudible. "This isn't right." My pulse quickened. Finally, a crack in the armor. Finally, a signal that maybe, just maybe, someone else recognized the injustice. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The plan was forming, subtle and patient, yet inevitable in its execution. I retreated to my room to gather my thoughts. Strategies, outcomes, potential leverage, and reactions swirled in my mind. I had options: confrontation, public exposure, manipulation of social expectations. Each pathway carried risk, each demanded precision. But one thing was certain: I wouldn't be erased quietly, not this time. By the time I returned to the threshold of the living room, I had mapped the night. My role wasn't passive anymore. Observation had become strategy. Every glance, every whispered word, every reaction could be used to reclaim what was mine: dignity, presence, and control over my own narrative. I lingered, waiting for the moment the fiancé might slip again, for the micro reaction that would reveal his true stance. Patience, I reminded myself, was the ultimate weapon. And with that thought, I smiled inwardly. The night was young, and the game had only just begun. I watched from the hallway as the evening unfolded. Mom laughed at a story, oblivious to the silent storm brewing just beyond her view. My sister leaned close to her fiancé, whispering, seemingly in private, yet I could feel the tension pulsing between them. Each glance toward the doorway reminded me that I had to act, but carefully, surgically. For one tense moment, I considered barging in, voice loud, exposing everything. But I reminded myself, patience was a weapon, and reactionary fury would only rob me of leverage. I needed precision, proof, and timing. This wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming control over a night that had been stolen from me. I slipped back to my room, phone in hand. Screenshots of past conversations with my father, subtle hints from my sister's fiancé, even small recordings of whispered remarks. I had quietly collected them over the past few months. Tonight, they weren't just backups. They were ammunition, each piece a micro payoff waiting to be deployed at the perfect moment. I thought about confrontation scenarios. Storming in would trigger chaos, yes, but it lacked finesse. I needed an approach that maximized exposure while minimizing my own emotional compromise. My strategy formed: observe, wait for micro reactions, and then reveal everything in a way that no one could deny. Public accountability, not private arguments. As I returned to the living room doorway, I noticed my sister's fiancé fidgeting, almost imperceptibly. His two words from earlier, "Wait, what?" reverberated in my mind. He was conflicted, a potential ally or a weak link. Either way, I had to account for him in my plan. Every action, every movement, every glance mattered. Observation became my chessboard. I rehearsed silently, the optimal moment for exposure, when attention was at its peak and when reactions would carry maximum weight. Perhaps during Mom's toast, or as Dad made a comment praising family unity. I needed timing, spectacle, and clarity. The world had to see the truth as undeniable fact. Then came the first micro payoff. My sister, oblivious to my strategic gaze, whispered a sarcastic remark under her breath to her fiancé. I caught it and archived the proof, an audio note recorded subtly, almost accidentally. It was small, but evidence mattered, and her casual dismissal of the situation revealed her awareness of Dad's manipulation, another piece of the puzzle. I moved to the kitchen under the guise of grabbing a drink, recording snippets of hushed conversations, collecting details. Each small soundbite, each tone of voice would later become undeniable proof. Strategy demanded patience, and the night was mine to map. Every tiny piece of behavior contributed to the mosaic I was constructing. As hours ticked on, the tension in the room thickened. My presence unseen, the family oblivious, I became almost invisible, observing from the shadows. The warmth and laughter contrasted starkly with my own internal storm. Yet that contrast was vital. It highlighted the betrayal and made my eventual reveal even more impactful. I recalled moments from the past, subtle exclusions, dismissive gestures, Dad's increasingly controlling rules, my sister's quiet complicity. Each memory strengthened my resolve. The emotional weight fueled my clarity, stripping away distraction, leaving only focus on precision and impact. Revenge, I reminded myself, had to be measured, deliberate, undeniable. By now, I had mapped every movement, every seating arrangement, every potential witness. The living room became my stage, each participant unknowingly cast in a narrative I would soon orchestrate. Mom's warmth, Dad's authority, my sister's nervy glances, and her fiancé's conflicted stares, all elements of the perfect setup. I crafted a mental timeline. First, observe further micro-reactions to catch any inconsistencies. Second, gather final proof in a non-intrusive way. Third, execute exposure at a peak moment, leveraging both audio and visual evidence. Fourth, exit with composure, letting the fallout unfold naturally. I didn't need theatrics. Clarity and timing were enough. Midway through the evening, I overheard a quiet exchange between my sister and her fiancé. "We can't let her see this yet." Yet. That sentence, almost whisper, confirmed my suspicion. The fiancé had his own sense of guilt or fear, an ally, or at least an unwitting participant. I archived this, heart hammering, knowing it could become the tipping point in the reveal. I practiced my internal monologue, rehearsing calmness while delivering devastating clarity. Emotion had to be controlled, expression precise. Every word, every pause would amplify impact. I pictured Dad's reaction, Mom's confusion, my sister's shock, and the fiancé's subtle panic. Timing was everything. Chaos would be choreographed. By the time cake was brought out, I had my full strategy laid. Observation complete, evidence collected, and micro payoffs noted. I allowed myself a quiet smile, anticipation tempered with control. They believed they had the evening mapped, unaware that the threads of the night were woven by me. Finally, I made my move. A subtle step forward, just enough to be noticed, catching the fiancé's eye. His expression, a mixture of surprise and dread, was validation. The plan was set. Observation had become action. Timing had aligned. The reveal was imminent, and the impact would be devastating. I withdrew, retreating to my room under the pretense of resting. From there, I would orchestrate the final sequence. Messages sent, evidence cued, attention focused, reactions amplified. The night's finale, a perfectly timed display of truth and consequence, was only moments away. My patience, meticulous planning, and control over the narrative ensured that when it came, it would leave no doubt. Sitting quietly, I allowed myself to reflect. The anger that had surged earlier was now a tool, refined and precise. I felt calm, almost serene. Observation and preparation had transformed fury into power. When the moment came, every reaction, every gasp, every whispered apology would unfold exactly as intended. And then I remembered the first micro-hook, the fiancé's two words. Wait, what? What? Those words were a key, an indicator that even the most seemingly loyal participants could waver. That tiny fracture in the facade would be the first domino, and I would ensure the entire chain of revelation fell perfectly, leaving truth exposed and injustice corrected. I stepped out of my room and let the living room swallow me again. The cake glittered, guests clapped, and Mom lifted her glass for a toast. I moved like a guest who belonged, but my hands betrayed nothing. My phone was in my palm, the messages queued, the evidence compiled. The show would begin on my cue, invisible and precise. Dad raised his glass and began to speak, voice warm, proud, perfect cover. I watched his face, waiting for the right breath. Just as he said, "To family," I tapped send. The first message went to the group chat, a voice note I'd recorded hours ago of my sister admitting she and Dad planned the exclusion. The room kept clapping until the audio played, cutting applause into stunned silence. You could feel the temperature change. Mom's smile faltered mid-toast. Guests who were mid-chew froze. My sister's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then shut it at the chorus of confused murmurs. Dad's hand trembled on the glass. The voice note repeated, clear and undeniable, folding private scheming into public hearing. Before anyone could scramble, I hit send on the second file. A short clip of my sister's fiancé, recorded accidentally, saying exactly, "We can't let her see this yet." The way he froze when he realized his words were now public was the most honest reaction of the night. His eyes darted to me, then to my sister, and guilt burned bright for a second too long. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Phones surfaced like flocks of startled birds. Screens lit up with messages and timestamps. People checked their devices, eyes flicking between me and the evidence in confusion and dawning understanding. I kept my posture steady, a small, controlled smile that refused to give them the chaos they deserved. My sister lunged toward me, voice sharp. "What are you doing?" she hissed. She was furious, scared, scrambling for control. I answered slowly, in public and calm. "I'm showing everyone what I kept seeing all along." The crowd's curiosity shifted to attention. The secret they'd arranged to keep folded into the room like a wet blanket. Dad's face shifted through stages, disbelief, anger, then that brittle thing people have when their authority fractures. "How dare you?" he started, but his words drowned under the stream of confirmation. Someone near the doorway said, "Is this real?" And the bride of the night, my mother, looked at me with watery eyes, betrayal and confusion competing on her face. The fiancé tried to stammer an apology. Maya, please, listen," he began. I cut him off with a single line I had practiced until it felt surgical. No, I'll let your words do the talking. He was panting for an explanation that wouldn't come. His 2 words earlier had been a crack. Now they were the concrete evidence that built the wall between us. A cousin demanded to see more, and I obliged. I played a sequence of messages that charted the plan: instructions to exclude me, jokes about how mom wouldn't notice, confirmations. Each message landed like a small hammer. Guests shifted, whispering. Faces that had smiled at Dad a moment before now looked like jurors considering a verdict. I could hear the slow, awful math of reputation recalibrating around the circle. Friends exchanged looks. Someone I'd known for years said, "I can't believe this." The realization didn't rebuke me, it vindicated me. It meant the narrative had flipped. The world that had been quietly arranged against me now had to answer to facts. My phone buzzed with messages, shocked reactions, 1 or 2 supportive notes, and a tentative, "Are you okay?" from an old friend. The flood of attention was surreal, but I'd prepared for it. I hadn't wanted chaos, I wanted clarity. And clarity, once public, has its own irreversible power. That's the moment the balance tilts. Dad tried to argue, voice louder, the old posture of control reasserting itself. But the room had already witnessed the tape. His words were background noise. Mom looked between us, tears brimming, and her confusion turned to quiet anguish. She stepped between us, touching Dad's arm as if to hold the family together with a single fragile gesture. My sister's fiancé left the room like a man shrinking from a spotlight. Someone offered him a coat, he declined and slipped out the back, head down. That departure was the point of no return. People would talk, and their choices would live in the rumor mill long after candles cooled. I stayed, upright and composed, letting the consequences unfold without me. After a while, my phone pinged with a message from my sister. "We can fix this." I read it aloud, calm and unbothered. "We can?" I said to the room. "Who will we be fixing? Your conscience? Your reputation? The truth is already out." The room hummed. There were no simple fixes when a private plan becomes public. Later, when guests thinned and the house quieted, Mom walked to the kitchen, eyes red. She sat across from me, hand trembling as she reached out. "I didn't know," she whispered. The look on her face was a collision of regret and sorrow. I could have unleashed all my fury. Instead, I chose a different currency: dignity. "You didn't," I agreed. "But now you do." I packed a small bag then, quietly. I didn't need to make scenes. My exit would be practical and final. I left a note on the mantel rather than a speech, short, true, and mercilessly fair. "You erased me. I reclaimed myself." My words were not loud, but they were immutable in black ink. 48 hours later, the fallout had spread in the ways gossip does: whispered calls, social media threads, and awkward texts. Dad's stoic front had slipped into silence. My sister called, voice raw, begging for mercy I had already refused. Her fiancé sent a frantic message apologizing. But apologies that follow exposure are thin candles in a storm. The final twist came when a mutual friend forwarded a message from a recruiter who'd seen the reaction online and contacted me with an offer: a space to speak, to share my story, and a small platform promise that stunned me. Losing a birthday had led to a public truth that carved a path forward. The irony that stung hardest was also the most satisfying. In the end, I kept my dignity and my agency. They tried to write me out of my life, but I turned their script into proof of their choices. The last laugh wasn't a gloat. It was quiet and definitive. When I posted a single line to my private account, I didn't ask for sympathy. I stated what had happened and moved on. "You banned me from a cake. I banned you from my life." The line landed like a closing door.